And so here to talk about open source speech synthesis, he goes by a single name. He's like Prince. Give it up for Zoa.
Okay, so let's get it started. Today, we're going to talk a bit about open source speech synthesis, just to show what's possible in the market. First, a bit about me. I'm conveniently dressed in a banana today. I used to be a VoIP engineer a long time ago. Since those days, I co-founded a company called Zoiper. And now we made a startup, Banafo. Short is Banafo. A little bit more on the next slide about that. Something that's quite important to know for today is that I'm not a machine learning expert, and especially not in speech synthesis. These slides are about our findings in, I think, the last 3 months, just to see what is possible currently with open source technology at this very moment. So last year, I talked a little bit about our speech recognition for Banafo. Some things changed in the meantime. Now we have a real-time demo. I will give you a QR code in the next slide. If you want to play with a real-time streaming speech recognition, you can do so. We also have an API now, so if you don't want to use any of the tools we have and just want to have a replacement for Google Cloud Services or Amazon Speech or whatever they're called, you could do so now already. And we also have a new Android app. Post-COVID times, if you want to have a normal physical meeting, you can put this thing on the table in the middle and have your recordings still transcripted and uploaded and maybe uploaded to the CRM. So, but enough publicity. So if anybody wants to try the real-time streaming, it's a good time to take a picture. If not, come to me afterwards. The URL is very difficult, so just wait for a second. Until the cameras are gone. Okay, I can put it back in the end, so. I have no audio. Just waiting for the small message from our sponsors to come up. As soon as we figure out the glitches. Good to go? Okay. Wait, maybe if I... No. Shall I try again? Maybe this will make a difference.
Good morning, Clucon visitors. This is Ronald Grump from the Trump Hotel on the other side of the water. People keep telling me it's the absolute best hotel, maybe in the whole world. Anyhow, I just want to interrupt this presentation with a very small service announcement. It would be really, really appreciated if this guy, I think you call him Brian West, I call him something else. If you can ask him to move his Tesla, it is blocking my view. I should totally screw this guy. I mean, sue this guy because nobody, and I mean, nobody knows more about suing people than me.
So let's just talk a bit now about how we made this thing. It's going to be at the end though. First, I want to talk a little bit more about how it fits in the whole Banafo part. So in the case of Banafo, for the speech recognition part, there's a lot of components involved. And one of those components is text-to-speech. So part of our data is fabricated with additional data that is coming from text-to-speech. But obviously, we don't need super high quality for that. We just need something that the model, the speech recognition model, would be able to train on. But if we have a look at this slide, the parts in orange are taking speech as input, and after some processing are returning something else. Transcripts, timestamps for voice activity detection, maybe what speaker is detected for this time frame. Anything from audio to something non-audio. On the other hand, we have the things that actually do something and end up with audio. For example, we could start with an audio file, do noise reduction, and we'll end up with audio again. We're not going to talk about this now. Obviously, we use it in Banafo as well. But we are going to talk about the speech synthesis. There's lots of places, lots of things you can start with to end up with voice. You could, for example, Facebook is doing some very cool things with brain waves, EEG, and it's converting them back into text or back into speech. There's some other cool device for people who lost their vocal tracts because of an illness. It's some sort of microphone you put here, and then it synthesizes speech. You could obviously also start from text, and it's a normal text-to-speech. We'll talk a bit about this one today. But you could also start from another speech sample. For example, for voice cloning or to convert somebody whispering into normal audio. Or another example that I know people are working on, but I haven't seen any demos for, is for people working in call center, for example, from India, and is to do real-time accent removal or replacement by, I don't know, maybe some accent from Texas or so, where the customers are. So, but today, the main focus was to clone Allison Smith. I think, who knows Allison? Probably quite a few people. She's a common speaker on these conferences as well, which is part of the reason why we wanted to do it, because we could clone a random voice from one of our colleagues, but nobody would know that person, so it doesn't really make sense. You couldn't say if it worked or not. Another reason is that she's obviously a professional voicer. I don't know how it's really called. So that means she has high quality recordings that are always in the same setting, same microphone, same room environment, which would make our life a lot easier because we don't really have to clean up, filter the samples. Another reason is that since this is a telephony conference, she's mostly voicing, or a big part is voicing IVRs. And so if somebody would like to do a chatbot with her voice, but that is really not with hard-coded examples, but can really do communication, you would need a voice just like that. So it's for us also interesting because it's not conversational audio, it's really samples, so the domain is a little bit different, and obviously the results are also going to be different because it's not pure conversational audio. That's her face. So let's start without any training. What can we do to just clone a voice without having that voice in the data set first? Why would somebody want to do that? Imagine maybe it's a voice that belongs to somebody who lost their voice in the meantime, because of an illness, because of an accident. It might be sufficient to clone a somewhat realistic representation of that voice just by having a couple of voicemails, or maybe a presentation like the one I'm doing now. Or maybe you're a game development studio and you would like to have your users be able to use their voice to play with their in-game character. And obviously, if you have 1 million users for the players for the game, well, you can't train on everybody's voices. It's going to be way too expensive. You also can't ask them, hey, please record 24 hours of audio for me. It's not realistic. So this opens some extra things, and it's something very cool to play with. So how do they do it? There's something called X-Vector speaker embeddings encoders that is made based on a model that is trained on many thousands of voices. I think it's Voxilab is a data set or so, 50,000 voices, I think. And so they take all these samples and they augment them with noise and ambulances passing by, and they do all kinds of things to mess up the audio a bit. And they train a model to distinguish the different speakers. So it's actually something coming from speaker recognition or deorization. And so these weights for an individual person give a representation of the things that are unique for this person's voice. It might be an accent, it might be the speed at which they speak, it might be something related to the pitch of the voice. So things that are really characteristic for that voice. And they found out that if you train a text-to-speech model with it, or voice synthesis model with it, and you add also these things, not just the transcript and the audio, but also the speaker embedding, then when you try to make it to adjust for a new voice, it could actually use or kind of find X vectors that are close to the voice that you're trying to clone, and maybe combine them and do some interpolation with them. How it actually works, I don't really know, but there's some very cool papers about it. So let's try such an example. The guys from the Cookie project, some forest frog or so, it's ex-Mozilla as far as I know, have a very cool framework to do speech, to do text-to-speech and voice synthesis in general. And they have an online example. You can find it on the bottom there. You can actually just play with it. And so you can upload a few reference files of a speaker, your target speaker, in this case Allison, and you give it some text, and it's going to produce something. So let's have a look, see how this goes. I think I lost the audio again.
Did you hear about the explosion at the cheese factory? All that was left was debris.
So it's not really Allison. It's somewhat closer to her voice, but I can't say that it's really Allison. So let's try some other things.
Световно известният български цигулар Васко Василев, който от дълги години живее в чужбина, се завръща в родината за поредица от концерти в различни градове на страната. Всъщност това не...
So this was using text-to-speech with a cloned voice, or with a target voice. Now it's also possible to start with a voice, and so then you keep the prosody and you keep certain intonations, but still to change the voice. Now I did several experiments with that. It's not really working all that well, but still it will give you an idea. So first, Morgan Freeman. This is how to do it. Maybe if we have time, we can do it afterwards.
This is the story of the beginning of the end. So, child, sit back, take note, because this is how the year 2020 went down.
So, too long.
This is the story of the beginning of the end. So, child, sit back, take note, because this is how the year 2020 went down.
So I don't know exactly why Morgan Freeman, it's so difficult to understand him afterwards. Maybe it's because of a very special voice. Also, I'm trying to convert from man to woman, so that also doesn't help. But maybe next sample will work better.
Frankly, they're miracles. If you want to know the truth, they're miracles. People criticize me when I say that, but we have things happening that look like they're miracles coming down from God.
Frankly, they're miracles. If you want to know the truth, they're miracles. People criticize me when I say that, but we have things happening that look like they're miracles coming down from God.
So this is somewhat a mixture of the two voices, you can say. And now so this is the Cookie project. This is just the part that is the pure cloning. To do this, most of it is opening the Google Colab and loading the libraries and doing the installs, the Python libraries required. The actual voice cloning, it takes a minute maybe. It's not so much. Now I want to talk about another cool project, something Evan really likes. It's called Tortoise TTS. It's called like this because it's super, super, super slow. So this is something trained for several months on 50,000 hours of audio. And it is inspired by the DALL-E project. So it's kind of generating audio, and it sounds super realistic in terms of prosody. Unfortunately, I don't think it's all that good in cloning voices. But it has some additional possibilities, like you can say it, oh, please say this text in a sad way, in a happy way, in an angry way. So it's something cool to play with, but I can't say that really for the cloning it went all that good.
Did you hear about the explosion at the cheese factory? All that was left was debris.
But it sounds much more natural than all the other approaches I've tried. So since we're obviously not happy with how this sounds so far, let's try to train our own models. To train a model, the first thing you need is the data. This is what we asked Allison permission for to also give her some additional samples. And then you need to find a framework, and then, well, you need to use a lot of electricity. So to start, Allison gave us some very long files that we cut in smaller pieces with voice activity detection. So where we find silence, we cut it, and like this we use it, and we gave it to Banafo to make the transcripts for it. Afterwards, we have to convert it, we have to trim the silence. The beginning and the end is very important when you want to train your own model. We only kept the samples that we were very confident about our transcripts. I did none of the transcripts for any of the data sets manually. Everything was automatic. You need to convert it, you need to normalize it as well so that the sounds are quite good. But in the case of Allison, this was very good. In the case of Trump, we noticed that in the data we downloaded, we downloaded random speeches. And sometimes there's like a guy that announces Trump to come on stage, or maybe it's an interview or so. So in that case, you also need to do the speaker recognition to filter things, so speaker utilization, and then get out the other samples. And do a lot of cleaning. It is unlike speech recognition, that is very easy in terms of quality of the data. I mean, the transcripts just have to be good, but the audio can be miserable, and it's better to be noisy. For the text-to-speech generation, you need very clean audio. So once you have the data, you need a framework as well. All of these are open source frameworks for speech synthesis. Now, most of those are kind of old. I think you're probably familiar with MariTTS and maybe eSpeak and some of the other ones. But these things, they're very fast, but they don't really offer the best quality possible anymore. The frameworks I would recommend nowadays are Cookie, SpeechBrain. I think Athena, I haven't played with that one, but it looks similar to the other ones. It's recent and updated, and ESPNet. We mostly used Cookie and ESPNet, and I have a little bit of experience with SpeechBrain as well. These are also frameworks that are used for the other part, for the speech-to-text. So once you select your framework, I would definitely recommend to stick with Cookie. It's the easiest, offers the most flexibility, like the voice cloning part, it's much harder with the other ones. Then you have to choose the architectures you would like to use. Now, in our case, we did this in the last couple of months. I had some experience with Tacotron 2 before, but I decided to go for the VITS project, this one here, first one. Actually, all three are kind of similar, because it doesn't require you to align the audio first, which makes a big difference. With aligning, I mean to have timestamps for the beginning and the end of every word, which you can automate, but it's still a lot of work, especially if you try to do something that's not English. So in this case, all the samples are done with VITS. In the case of VITS also, it's training everything end to end, so you don't have to try to optimize two different components, because the other one first converts into a MEL spectrogram and then goes into an audio file. So it's a lot more work to deal with. After you selected an architecture, you just have to do minimal configuration. The most important part is to decide if you want to use letters or phonemes. We used phonemes for most of the things. I think I used letters for the transfer to Bulgarian. It is a little bit harder to use. Takes a lot more time to do, obviously, but it also offers you more flexibility, because maybe you can change one of the samples just by changing the type of phoneme that goes there. We'll see some example in a bit later. And then obviously, if you want to do the X vectors for the actual cloning, you need to first set up that model as well, make X vectors for every sample you have, which is a lot more work as well. So then you can start to train. If you do everything from scratch on a single GPU, you probably will have something reasonable after maybe a week. If you do transfer learning and you start with a pre-existing model, you will probably have something reasonable in a couple of hours. So it's not as bad as speech recognition to train it. And just, I think a 12 gigabyte video card will probably be sufficient to do so. Now the big question, when do you stop training? When you do speech to text, there is a target transcript to optimize for. If you don't get closer to your target reference, then obviously your model is no longer getting better, and maybe it's even getting worse, so you know when to stop. In the case of the synthesis of voice, it's a bit hard to say. Is this iteration better than the previous one? It's difficult, because there's different ways to measure this. You might have perfect intonation, perfect rhythm for the things. Everything is perfect, but there's this metallic sound in it. Or in the case of a model that I was trying to retrain something to give another demo today, but I ended up with a very feminine version of Trump. So I couldn't really use it, or maybe we can use it for other purposes, but it was not realistic, so I didn't use it. So the things you can do is to make the X vector for your samples, your generated samples, and compare them to your target samples, and check the distance between the two, or for the average for all the samples. This could give you a good indication. You can check if the male spectrogram visually is similar to the other one. You could check if the timestamps for the individual words that are aligned in the text, if those are similar. So all of these things give you an indication, but none of them really give you a real idea for it. So it's better to just listen to it a bit as well and maybe ask multiple people to see what they think of it. There is one way to do it, automated the DTS scores, but I think it's actually using the X-vector cosine similarity.
My grandfather swore by adding a spoonful of gunpowder to his tea every morning. He said it was a very old remedy to help him live longer, and it worked. He lived to the ripe old age of 97. He left a widow, 2 children, 14 grandchildren, and a 50-foot crater where the crematorium used to be.
So when you listen to this sample, you can notice 2 issues. It said live instead of life. And at the end, there is something that sounds a bit, the to be, it doesn't really, the intonation or the prosody doesn't match up there. There is something that we messed up during the training. None of our trained samples had punctuation. No capital letters, no commas, no dots. So obviously it would be better to have this. There's another sample that is just taking a random article from Wikipedia, which sounds a little bit better already, I think.
A joke is a display of humor in which words are used within a specific and well-defined narrative structure to make people laugh, and is usually not meant to be taken seriously. Usually it takes the form of a story, often with dialogue, and ends in a punchline.
So blah, blah, blah keeps going on. So it's clear that the model we trained is very good to do IVR, but it's probably not as good to do audiobooks or to do a real story of some sort. So it depends a lot. So if you're looking to make such a model, to do real-time chatbot or real-time IVR, then you probably want such a data set like the one Allison was generously enough to give me. If you want to do audiobooks, you're probably better off getting somebody to read audiobooks to train that one. So what can we do better? So there's certain things that are very difficult. That is, words that have the same spelling but different pronunciation, like to resume or resume. I think it's possible to probably make a better G2P model that is converting the graphemes to the phonemes, so the letters to the sounds, based on the context. But I haven't tried this yet. I don't know exactly what the solution is. Obviously, you could change it manually, but that's not going to work if you want to do a somewhat real-time streaming IVR. We could improve it more also, the intonation, for example, by having the transcripts with punctuation, but especially also by having a lot more audio. To give you an idea just how feasible it is to clone a voice, this copy of Allison and Trump is made with, I think, 70 minutes of audio. So it's not that much. It's not like you need weeks and weeks worth of audio to train this. This QR code will take you to a model demo page trained on Trump, so you can play a bit with it yourself. We'll probably take it down after a couple of hours, so if you want to do something, do it now. I don't have a model that you can play with from Allison, because obviously it's her voice. Maybe she would be willing to license it to people who want to, so in that case you can either ask me to bring you in touch with her, or if you know her, contact her directly. I'll wait a bit for the pictures. So I know maybe they'll give some prize for the most offensive Trump imitation from the day. Do we have any questions? See, we have another 2 minutes left. Yes.
Yeah, so isn't this already a solved problem? Because, you know, these kind of custom speech synthesis systems have existed for decades now.
The custom speech so far was not all that great. So it is very much a work in progress. There is every week at the moment a new paper coming out. So most of the things that I discussed today are probably something from the last 12 to 6 months. So the text to speech is old, but to make it sound natural is actually quite recent that they're getting there. I think the last Microsoft models have better quality or better mean opinion score rating from actual people listening to it than normal voices. So it's really evolving very fast. But all the software I used is off-the-shelf open source software. So we didn't develop anything new. Just wanted to check what's out there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.